This is Father Bill W., and welcome to the podcast. I'm an Episcopal priest here in Austin, Texas. Had the gift of sobriety since December the 27th of 1972. For that, I am very, very grateful. Purpose of these podcasts is basically to go deeper into some of the history of AA, into the spirituality of AA, and into the psychology that underlies the steps. And kind of grew up as a counselor in the treatment field. My charge was to help people bridge the gap between the addiction that had them trapped and the recovery process that I believe the 12-step program offers to everybody. So that's what I'm about. And just a few announcements before we get going. We're in the middle of, or just starting the summer, I guess, and not doing any workshops over the summer. Wanted to get that word out there. I'm trying to record during this time a professionally done workshop that we can put onto the website so that people who are interested in doing two-way prayer and in spreading the word for other people, that they can go to that site and get all of the information that they need, and it won't be dependent on coming to a monthly workshop, that kind of thing. So that's the idea behind that. We're going to put a lot of work and effort into that, and if it comes about, I'll let you know. You can always find the events section on the newsletter. Encourage you to sign up for that. Two-way prayer is the website. Go there, sign up for the newsletter, and we'll let you know what's happening with that. I want to thank our supporters who've we've been relying on because I don't take anything from this work, but we do have some pretty significant expenses. We're in the process of moving a lot of the podcasts over to YouTube, so that those will be available to more people, and got a couple of individuals working on that. So those who have helped with the donations have really made all of this work possible. So deeply appreciate the help that you've given us. Okay. We are doing a series right now on the pamphlet called How to Listen to God. It was an Oxford group pamphlet circulated in 1938-39 in Akron, Ohio, done by Chaplain Batterson, John Batterson. What I like about it is it's a wonderful introduction to the process that they called two-way prayer. And so there's a link to this in the show notes. Strongly encourage that you download a copy so that you have it and can go through it at your leisure. It's a marvelous set of directions. It's what I started off with almost 30 years ago when I got introduced to the Oxford group and the original program of AA. So the pamphlet begins by saying, these are a few simple suggestions for people willing to make an experiment. And boy, I hope people present the 12 steps as exactly that. This is an experiment. And if you can introduce that into people's minds, that you're not expected to believe these things, you're just expected to do them, and do them to the best of your ability. And at the end of doing them, you will have had a transforming spiritual experience that's going to change your life. So get that really clear. And it goes on to say that all that's needed is the willingness to try it honestly. Every person who's done this consistently and sincerely, they say, has found that it really works. There's that expression that Wilson took into the big book. This is how it works. What people find in the pamphlet, it says, is the most important and practical thing any human being can ever learn, how to be in touch with God. Now, I've studied a fair amount of psychology, and particularly the work of Carl Jung, and what underlies that depth psychology is the belief, the experience, even better, that there's something wrong with the human condition. That there's a hole in our souls, that we're made for something other than what we have, and that other is God. That the ego has sort of usurped the role of God in modern day life in particular. And if we can begin to grasp that and see that we are not the center, it's not our little egos that are the center of the world, that it's the God within us that is the center. And as we can begin to shift, move towards that center, come from that center, operate out of that center, by whatever name you call it, then we start to feel this connection, this end of the wilderness, of the isolation. Boy, I don't know about you, but I mean, from a very early age, I felt like I didn't quite fit in here. That if you ever really knew me, there's something wrong with me, and I sensed that. And I really believe alcoholics and addicts are very sensitive people, and we feel this, and we're made for connection. And what happens with us is we find something that sort of facilitates a connection. It may be a false connection, but I know the first time I drank, it was like, woo, I'm home. I've found a place of comfort and relaxation within myself, and I finally fit into my body. I finally fit into being me. I love reading about Bill Wilson, his first descriptions of his encounters with alcohol, that he felt awkward, shy, didn't fit in. Few drinks, man, everything clicked. Well, that's what we're searching for, and that's what the spiritual connection is all about. And that, I think, is what this pamphlet is ultimately designed to help facilitate us finding in our lives. So in the last episode, we reviewed the first 5 out of 9 principles that it sort of sets down, points, it calls them, that basically the first 5 talk about the existence of God and the power of God, that there is a power out there and we're not connected to it, but that power is able to be connected to. And it ends in the 5th one by saying that God is within us. Last damn place we'd ever think to look, not out there on a cloud, not out there separated from, but very much a part of me, and particularly a part of my mind, a part of my heart. And the pamphlet is an aid in reconnecting me to that which I've lost. I think that's a helpful way to approach it. So what we're going to do now in this episode is we're going to look at points numbers 6 through 9 in the pamphlet. And number 6, I'm going to spend most of my time on that, shifts the attention from the nature of God to God's relationship with us. What is the nature of that relationship? And it says some pretty astounding things in just a short sentence. It says, God cares for you very much. Comes a bit of a shock. God is interested in you. God has a plan for your life, an answer for every need and every problem you face. And what it's saying there is if I am able to connect with this mind of God that is embedded within me, I'm going to find what I've been looking for. I'm going to find that this voice, this self, as Jung called it, capital S, this self is my true center. And it has business to do with me. It has the business of my cooperating with it, working with it, so that it can become through me who I am intended to be. And it's not the ego. It's very difficult. Believe me, guys, I've been doing this for 30 years, working at this angle, and it's very elusive. It's like you can grasp a hold of it for a little while, and very quickly the ego reasserts itself and says, no, 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 I'm the center. So this two-way prayer process is shifting the center from the ego to the capital S self, the God within, what the big book calls the great reality within. Now, this shift it's difficult to understand, but approach it as an experiment. And so it's in that regard that I want to kind of start off here with a quote, because this is difficult for us, and it was difficult for Bill Wilson. Bill Wilson was kind of I don't think he was an atheist. I think he certainly was an agnostic. And that little chapter in the big book that's titled "We Agnostics," I think that's addressed to all of us, because at some level where this conflict is going on, this agnosticism, well, it's not really real. It's operational in us. So, lovely description here of Bill Wilson's struggle with this. And I want to quote from the AA publication, AA Comes of Age. It's on page 59. And in this section, it's telling the story of Ebby Thatcher, the man who got sober through the Oxford group. He's 60 days sober at this time, and he's making his initial call on Bill Wilson, who's stuck in his own addiction. And he's visiting with Wilson, and he's telling him what happened to him and how he tried this prayer experiment, and he found that it worked. So here's the quote. Ebby says, "Bill, I know you're going to gag on this, but they," meaning the Oxford group people, "taught me that I should try to pray to whatever God I thought there was for the power to carry out these simple precepts." And the precepts were to live a surrendered life and to have God guide your life. And in Ebby's case, and in every alcoholic and addict's case, it's to free me from this bondage of self. It goes on, "And if I did not believe that there was any God, then I had better try the experiment of praying to whatever God there might be. And Bill, it's a queer thing. But even before I had done all this, just as soon as I decided that I would try with an open mind, it seemed to me that my drinking problem was lifted right out of me." I'm telling you, there's something about honest prayer that opens my heart to this source of power and love that I'm not in contact with, but that's waiting for an opportunity to become my center. I mean, it's really quick, It doesn't have to take years, Now you can get in touch with it and quickly lose it, and I think that's what most of us experience. That we come in contact with that during our two-way prayer. We feel the power of that connection, and then during the day, ego reasserts itself subtly. It takes over once again, and I fall asleep. I lose the connection, but that's okay. This is an ongoing process. And if you think you're going to just have it and everything's over and done with, well, better man than I, Gunga Din. I hope it happens to you. But for most of us, it's a gradual, slow awakening to this power that exists within us. Don't have to believe it. Just have to enter into the laboratory. And the laboratory's in my own life, and I have to try it, I have to put it to work. And so very typically, I'd come across when I was doing my research in the Oxford group, very frequently you'd find an Oxford group person starting off his or her prayer like this: "Oh God, if there is a God," blah, 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 whatever the prayer might be. Then stating their need. "Oh God, if there is a God." It's not that you have to know. It's not that you have to have experienced. It says you have to be willing to enter into this prayerful kind of relationship. And, I've done a few hundred two-way prayer workshops. That's why I'm anxious to kind of get one really, a good one down on film so that people can have access to it. But at the end of the workshop, I always give people an opportunity to enter into two-way prayer, to go to this God who may seem distant and detached, and in a spirit of imaginative prayer, opening themselves up, stating what their problem and need genuinely is, and then writing down the thoughts that come. If God were to speak, what would he say? And as they do this, you can feel the loving presence. I've listened to hundreds and hundreds of people, and it's almost like the same voice that I'm hearing coming back. It's unconditional love for the person who's in that prayer. And many, many people come to tears when they're doing that. Why? Because it's what they've been looking for all their life, but looking in the wrong places and putting up obstacles that don't have to be there. The ego is phenomenally obsessed with remaining our center. Listen to the big book. The problem is self. The problem is self-centeredness. 100 different forms is what it takes. And the only thing that really breaks through is prayer. And when does prayer break through? Most often, I think, when we're, this is what William James teaches, that Wilson read in his detox room, that when you're down, when you're really down, when you're really in need, watch for the breakthrough, because that's when the ego is weakened and troubled, and perhaps for a moment or two at least, it can step aside. And God, if there is a God, I need help from outside of me. So this love thing that people start to experience. I've said this before in some of these podcasts, that I'm a pretty firm believer that addiction is a love disorder, that I'm removed from this source of love. And I feel that, restless, irritable, discontent. All right? That's what the big book's talking about. But if this love is able to flow into me, that's when I'm able to find something that feels better than alcohol and drugs. Now, when I started studying the Oxford group material, as again, as I say, it was 30 years ago. I was given this pamphlet as part of that process. And I quickly learned that there was some literature that was very helpful. I mean, the whole Bible was not helpful. You know, sometimes people will open the Bible and wherever it falls, that's where I'm going to start. Well, that's not how they did it. They found certain pieces of scripture that were helpful to them in the Oxford group when they were intent on changing, letting go of a terrible resentment that was hurting them, or in the case of the alcoholics, people who needed desperately to get sober. There were pieces of literature from the Bible that were helpful. And one of them, maybe the greatest of them, was a book by Henry Drummond, and it focused on one small chapter in the New Testament, and it's chapter 13 in Paul's letter to the Corinthians. So it's 1 Corinthians 13. Huge when it comes to what AAs in the early days before the big book would read and study. And one of the things I learned about this, and it really kind of intrigued me, is that the people would study part of this very short piece of scripture and practice it. They'd take it into the laboratory. All right. So here's a little piece that I want you to kind of focus in on this in the form of change, which is what this whole thing is all about. How do we change? How do we change deeply? So here's what Paul says. Love is patient and kind. Well, what these guys would say is, well, I ain't patient and kind. And what they would do, true story, on a weekly basis, they would say to one another, okay, guys, we're going to go home this week and we are going to practice being patient and kind. Come back next week and see how we did with that. See if we can't rely on this power, not on ourselves, but on this power to provide for us the needed strength to face the challenge, to make me patient and kind. And I would look within. They would look within and call on this power and allow the power to do for them what they couldn't do for themselves. And that's not just not drink. It's be patient and kind. Then come back and say where you screwed up. And that's not the end of it. You know, I've screwed up a lot. Let me tell you, every day I screw up. And I've never been yelled at. In 30 years of doing two-way prayer, of listening to this voice inside, never once been yelled at. It's unconditional love that I am experiencing from within. And it's a part of every mind, even the worst of minds. You know, it's in us. It's what it means to be human. We have this ability to change, to transform, to regenerate, you know. Let me go on. Love doesn't envy. Love is not boastful or proud. This is the set of instructions they read at just about every wedding you go to. They're going to have somebody come up and read 1 Corinthians 13. Because what are we trying to do in a marriage relationship where we both got egos, you know, and they are what is going to challenge one another. And if anything is going to destroy the marriage, that's what it's going to be. So we better learn this stuff. And that's why it's read. Love is not boastful or proud. I never met an alcoholic who wasn't boastful or proud. All right. Love doesn't behave inappropriately. Well, there's a good one, eh? Okay, today, fellas and gals, we're going to practice behaving appropriately in each situation. See, there's the laboratory. There's bringing this thing to life, not some holy, holy, holy stuff. It's some I need help to live stuff. And I need the power. Praying only for God. This all of this stuff gets translated into the 11th step. Sought through prayer and meditation. Improve this conscious contact. Improve this connection. Praying only for what? Knowledge of God's will for us. When? In this situation, in that situation, in the next situation. And the power to carry that out. If I begin doing this experiment, I begin going inside and I begin finding a source other than my own ego that has the power to do what I cannot do. It doesn't seek its own way. It doesn't insist on having its own way. Boy, there's a good one, huh? Doesn't insist on having its own way. Watch yourself in the laboratory. See when the ego reasserts and says, I must have my own way in this. There's another voice inside that can tell you something different. And that voice is loving. See, that this is where the four absolutes come in. That if the message coming to you is not honest, pure, unselfish, and loving, throw it out. It cannot be from the voice. It cannot be from God. All right? So it has to pass that test. Doesn't pass the test, can't be from God. It rejoices with the truth. All right? And this is why the honesty thing is so important. We're liars. We lie to one another. We lie to ourselves. The ego is probably the greatest liar of all. Listen to the truth. It's what sets us free. This love, it bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. A lot of us, particularly early recovery, faced with some really tremendous challenges that in the past we're not able to handle. But there is within us a source of power and strength that can do for us what we can't do for ourselves. That's what it's saying. And that's why prayer is so important. Yeah, you can run to a meeting, but I'm telling you, there will come a time when the meeting is not there. There will come a time when the people in that meeting are not able to help you. There comes, and this is one of the things about Drummond in his book. He was a scientist. He believed in evolution, but he said Darwin was it's not just about evolution of the species. There's also a spiritual evolution that's going on in the human mind that is evolving. And this is what Jung picked up on, and that it makes a difference whether we listen to this voice and evolve spiritually ourselves. It's what makes a difference to the human race. I used to tell people when they came into treatment, this treatment center will not be the same now that you're here. It will be a better place or it'll be a worse place. And that was so true. And the same thing is true of your life in this world and my life in this world. It has an opportunity to evolve. It has an opportunity through the laboratory of my own life with the exact problems that I've got, the exact situations that I am faced with, just like you. It makes a difference whether you work your way through that and evolve to a higher level of consciousness, or you just say, screw it. And you go back to doing what you've always done, what I've always done. It makes a difference. Love never ends. One of Thomas Merton's great little lines, I guess I'd say, reading him a number of years ago. And he was asked about, did he believe in the next life? And he gave two answers to that I've come across. And he said, one of his answers was, yeah, do I believe in life after death? Yeah. He said, but I don't believe there's going to be much of me there. What he meant by that is, I don't think there's going to be much of my ego there. Not the ego that I've struggled with throughout life. I'm going to, I believe in an afterlife, but it will be different. It will be a life marked by willingness and marked most of all by love. See, most of all by love. And the other answer that he gave was, do I believe in an afterlife? And he said, yes, I do. Why? Because it's so difficult to learn this lesson that who you are, who I am, ultimately is love. That God is love. It's so difficult to learn that. How could that end? It's foolish to think that it could end. It's the whole work of evolution, spiritual evolution, to become more of who we really are. Who are we really? We are God. Scripture says that. Scripture says that. But we run from that. We are God wanting to manifest in us, through us, with us. And that's what recovery. To me, that's the great message of recovery. That we who maybe had such a hard time learning to love others, learning to love ourselves, such a hard time with that it starts to happen. And that's what Ebby was trying to say to Bill when he came to visit him. Bill, I tried this thing. I was a skeptic, but when I started to do it, I started to feel something. When I started to communicate on a personal level with this thing that I didn't understand, right? Something started coming through to me. So that's number 6. To me, that's the biggest one of these several that we're going to look at. God will tell you, it's number 7, God will tell you all you need to know. If I get in touch with this source, I will receive guidance. All right? Guidance. Not between what's right and wrong. As Dr. Bob said, you don't need guidance to know the difference, to know what to do if it's a choice between right and wrong. You don't need guidance. You need guidance if it's a choice between right and right. If this is a right thing and that is a right thing. So it's not just doing the next right thing, it's doing the right thing that the guidance is leading you to. That's a guided life. That's very different. It's not living by the rules. It's living in some ways outside of the rules. But finding the love that makes the rules and pay attention to that. God will not always tell you all that you want to know. And here's the day at a time thing. This is where this comes from. That one day at a time, I will, if I'm working the 4 absolutes in my life, and I'm looking to God for guidance, it will be provided. I won't see the whole picture, but I will see what is God asking me to do for that day. I listen for that and I write it down and I go about doing it. 8, God will help you do anything you're asked to do. So this is the source of the power. This is the power. Lack of power is our dilemma. We get in touch with this power, and this power now does for us what we can't do for ourselves. Just got to get right size, just got to get humble, just got to get aligned with this power. Number 9, final one for this episode. Anyone can be in touch with God anywhere, at any time. And then it lists several things that are required for this relationship, for this communication. To be still and quiet. To listen. To be honest about every thought that comes. To test the thought. To be sure they come from God. And then finally, to obey the thought. I part of my two-way prayer each day, I look at the day ahead. And this is what the big book says to do. Look at the day ahead and see if some thoughts come up. To call Joe, to do what I've been putting off for several days. And maybe a small thing. But there it is. Don't dismiss it. Write it down. And I take those things then as my guidance for the day. And I try to limit myself to 6 or 7, not ever too many more than that. And it's not a to-do list. It's a God list. And what does the big book say? It says, when we're new at this, we may do some foolish things. But God takes pleasure in that, it says. This voice inside takes pleasure in that. In what? And that I'm no longer asserting my ego as the center, that I'm allowing this other within, make that a capital O, other, to be my center. And then to be obedient. Characteristics that alcoholics and addicts are not prone to be obedient. Had some guidance, go and do it. And what the Oxford Group people said is if the guidance starts to drop out, that's one of the first things to look for. Did you stop being obedient? And they said it makes perfect sense. Why would this voice continue to speak if you're not going to obey? So this being obedient, doing the next right thing, it's a way of life. And I tell you, in 50 years, almost 50 years of doing this recovery business thing, I've always been very clear on God's will. Never has it been to drink or drug. It's not God's will for me. I know that. But what about my occupation? It's how I got ordained as a priest. I tell you that. The guidance kept coming up, you tried this when you were drinking and it didn't work. Maybe it's time to try it in sobriety. And maybe that's part of your discomfort. I got jobs through my two-way prayer. Put in an application at this place. They weren't even hiring. And I got guidance as to when it was time to leave that place. So if you begin to listen to this voice, it knows, it has a wisdom so much greater than the ego, the human ego has. Drummond knew that. So I'm going to encourage you. What Drummond said, Drummond said that. He said, read this little chapter, this 1 Corinthians 13. Read it, he said, once a week for 3 months. All right? Read that. And it'll change you. It'll change you. It'll change you. And it makes sobriety a journey, an excitement that actually better than alcohol or drugs. If you're new, probably not going to believe that. But if you're an old timer and if you've had love coming into your life and breaking through where you thought you'd never see it, you'll know that what I'm telling you is true. So we're going to go still deeper into the pamphlet next time, and it gets some very specific guidance, directions on how to do this two-way prayer process. I'll put a link to the First Corinthians thing. I'll put a link to Drummond's book. You can get it as a PDF. Won't cost you anything, and it's a quick read. Encourage you to do that. And I put the three pieces of scripture that the early AA people and the Oxford group people were very fond of. It's this one, 1 Corinthians 13. It's the Sermon on the Mount, not the MX Fox version, though they like that too, and the letter to James. So if you want an electronic copy of that, I'll either put it in the show notes where you can get it directly, or a place where you can write me, and I'll be happy to send it to you. So I think this pamphlet is really important. Wally P. was on our first episode, and he said he's given away about 1 million copies of it. It's a life changer. So hope you'll read it. Hope you'll do it. Thank you for listening. God bless, and keep coming back.